Hello, my name is Steve Olson. I'm the Manager of Training Services for MESA. MESA's Large Assembly Management class discusses what are the key components to maximizing PC performance when working with large assemblies in Inventor. There's a number of different elements to that or variables to that, and this class discusses those things. One of those key elements is the quantity or the part count that you would have in a large assembly. A lot of time in our large assembly management class is spent discussing why the part count is important and discussing workflows to help minimize the part count in an assembly, which then will boost performance. For example, in this assembly here, I could open up one of these components and then create a level of detail substitute for that through the levels of detail command here. There's three different types: a derive, a shrink wrap, and a select part file. Time is spent discussing the pros and cons of each, what are the particular settings for each, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to grab the shrink wrap type here. You can see there's a bunch of different settings. We'll discuss all the key settings here, what they mean, what are probably the best ones to go for, and discuss the impact that will have on a model. Time is also spent discussing what the substitute is, how it works, what does that mean. Now I'm in this assembly that has a substitute. What does the browser look like when I'm in that substitute? What does the browser look like when I'm in the assembly? How to handle updates that need to occur to that substitute, how changes are made to that substitute. Also covered is how to then utilize this substitute in an assembly. So I could then have a level of detail that would allow me to swap out that individual representation, the full-fledged representation with a substitute, and then be able to manage the part count. If you look in the bottom right hand corner of my screen now, I have 910 total components because I'm utilizing substitutes. If I go back to my master, I go to 1486. So time is spent discussing all the ins and outs of this, how to use these, and how to leverage that. Another element to that class is discussing how to manage these with a drawing. So you can see here I have a drawing set up with the left-hand view is the full assembly, the middle view is using a version of that assembly where I have some components swapped out for a substitute. The last is all of the different, it's actually the whole thing is a substitute, all one part file itself. So some time is spent discussing how some of the limitations of these. For example, in this case here, I could create a parts list for the middle version. Even though it is using substitutes, I could still create a parts list for that. I can even balloon it. However, on the part or the view that it is a substitute, I can create a parts list for it, but it will not let me balloon anything in that drawing or in that view because those parts don't exist. So there's some limitations there, and those are all discussed as to why and how those work the way that they do. Another key workflow discussed in that class is the Simplified Workflow, where I have the ability to take an assembly here and I'm going to say, well, I want to define some envelopes for a substitute here. So I can then grab one of these pieces here and create a bounding box for that to swap out that piece for a binding box. I can also tell it to include components. So as I pick pieces here based off my settings, I'm telling it to turn certain pieces off based off of that. Once I've got everything picked that I want to have included, I could then use a workflow to derive this out into an individual part file. So now if I tell it to view only the included, I can see this is what pretty good, this is the way I like it, and I could use a create simplified part to generate based off of that information. And we discussed, well, what can we use this for? It's part of the BIM workflow realistically, but there are other ways to leverage it in a large assembly management workflow. These topics and more are discussed in this class. If you'd like to sign up or if you have any questions about what's covered in the class, feel free to reach out to us at our toll-free number on the screen, or feel free to reach out to me at my email address on the screen.